Do you ever feel guilty for reading fiction? I mean, I read a lot of nonfiction. I'm presuming you do as well. But do you ever feel guilty for just picking up a fictional novel and just losing yourself in it? Nah, me either. Actually, I do. I find it very disconcerting to put down my nonfiction books and pick up just a fiction novel. And I found myself, I am Christopher Story, your host for Great Adventures in the Last Frontier, broadcasting live from the corner of West Hill and the Sterling Highway here at the mothership. Now, I'm the baby ship of Story Productions. The mothership is KPEN FM 102. David Becker sitting in the engineer and producers program chair this morning. Thank you, David, or this afternoon. Mr. Webb will not be with us for a couple of weeks, so we will just carry on in his stead and presume he's going to have a great time wherever he's going and whatever he is doing. So my daughter Zoe tells me that it's good for the brain to read fiction. It's good for the brain to lose yourself into a story and not just always exclusively read nonfiction. Well, there's only so much time in a day. I've got a myriad of interests, so I find myself reading exclusively nonfiction. Exclusively. And, I'm at any given time reading 3 or 4 books at any given time, and I just don't allow myself to just, relax into a story unless it's a specific management or negotiation or, whatever it is, or historical perspective. It's got to be nonfiction. So this weekend I said to myself, you know what? Put down the books, pick up the novel, and read. Because I find on vacation, I always read nonfiction. I don't know why, but on vacation, I allow myself to do it. And I said, you know what? I'm taking a vacation this weekend right here in my own living room. Had a great time doing it. It felt really good. So Zoe's advice was well taken. But it brings up a larger point. You set up rules that you live by. How often do you take the time to just say, you know what, I'm going to reevaluate this rule? Is it the way we live, the way we work, the way we play or don't play? And you are in charge in America of your own life. And you can do what you want to do when you want to do it still for now. And I just thought, what an interesting time to reflect as we move into the spring of our year. Should we not also be looking at moving into the spring of our life and saying, I'm going to make some changes today that will affect my life going forward, because you live by a set of rules that you've adopted a long time ago, and I'm encouraging you to take another look at those from time to time and go ahead and violate some of your own rules so long as they're arbitrary and aren't obviously contrary to laws and morals and ethics. But life's too short. Let's eat some dessert first. You are invited by the rest of the program. Amazing. We've got U.S. Senate candidate Joe Miller after 1 o'clock, and here in about 15 minutes, I'll be joined by Hannah Heimbuch, and she is a writer for the Homer Tribune. You may have already read the story about the Chihuahuas that were, one of them anyway, poor little dog. Oh, and this comes on the heels of me telling you last week how important my dog Cooper is to me. And I just couldn't imagine the little guy getting picked up by an eagle or an owl. Well, you're going to hear all about it. Extra, Heimbuch in the house. We'll be talking to Hannah about that story. And I must tell you, she's a very good writer. I think we should be looking out for her to do big things in our community. And lastly, before we move into the big meat of the program, I want to remind you, you are invited to my pottery show on May 2nd. Talk about moving into a place of relaxation. So zen and just so relaxing is pottery to me. It's been 10 years out of my life and that I haven't done it. And so I'm back to it. T-Bowls and Zen Gardens, May 2nd. It's the first Friday in May at the Fireweed Art Gallery. Proceeds, remember, are going to the foster kid program that you helped start through the Kachemak Board of Realtors. And those people, trust me, and the children involved appreciate every blanket, every bag, every toiletry kit, everything's been donated, has really gone to a great cause. Well, we're going to try and inject a little bit of cash into the coffers so we can keep refreshing and supplying those great bags to the foster program. And it's very much appreciated. Worthy cause. I want to see you May 2nd for T-Bowls and Zen Gardens, all thrown chaperoned by myself, and just having a fantastic time. I hope to see you there. So I'm going to, again, explain. There's been some questions about my new Senator Mark Begich campaign. We're going to talk about the Kinnick Bridge a little bit, why marijuana may help Senator Begich's campaign, according to some people that think they're in the know. And we've got your Blackwater Bend Espresso Alaskan Mindbender. Much, much more to come here on Alaska Matters Radio. You're listening to Alaska Matters Radio. I'm Chris Story, your host for Great Adventures in the Last Frontier. You can go to our website anytime, alaskamattersradio.com, alaskamattersradio.com. You're also welcome to send me an email throughout the program, before, after, whenever, alaskamattersradio@gmail.com. alaskamattersradio@gmail.com. And, of course, as always, during the program, please feel free to text message me at 299-7653. In fact, here's an idea. If you've got a question for newly announced Senate candidate Joe Miller, feel free to text it to me. I'll ask him any questions you want or think are relevant and relative to the campaign. Feel free to text me now, 299-7653. I'll get those worked into the conversation. Again, Joe Miller, U.S. Senate candidate, about 1 o'clock, just a little after. He'll be here with me. And then coming up shortly, Hannah Heimbach and her heartwarming story about the dog. But first, I want to explain something. And by the way, I can't go much further without saying this, because it means that much. Horizon Satellite makes this all possible thanks to their wireless technology. If you're hearing me, it's as a result of the wireless capabilities of Horizon Satellites and Horizon Wireless, not just television anymore. I'm telling you, these guys have got it figured out, and I'm proud to be with them on this program and really having them be a big part of it. Now, a partner, really, in Alaska Matters Radio, and that's through Horizon Satellite and Horizon Wireless. They're on Heath Street in Homer, Alaska, and wherever you are, contact them and see what they can do for you. You'll be as impressed as Dave Becker and I are here on Alaska Matters Radio. Senator Mark Begich, it's time to bring him home. So I started this launch last week. I wished I had thought about what candidate Miller said. Joe Miller's calling his a Liberty launch. I wish I had thought about that. But instead, I'll just continue to call this Senator Mark Begich. It's time to bring him home. And somebody suggested to me maybe that it was inappropriate to say, to enter the family. It reminds me of Anchorman, where they agree, these very, very arrogant and sort of elitist anchormen are talking about they're going to get into a big fist fight. They're going to rumble. And they say, first of all, they say, no touching the hair in the face, no punching the face and touching the hair. And then later they talk about leave the mothers out of it. But they're, so here's the deal. Here's the gist of this whole campaign is that when you work as hard as Senator Mark Begich did to get Obamacare through, you need a break. You cannot continue at the pace and hustle that this man is doing and maintain any sense of clarity, sanity, or humanity. If you look at some of his ads, he has literally snow machined to the Prudhoe Bay area and drilled wells. And gas is flowing as a result of Senator Begich snow machining to the Prudhoe Bay area. I mean, that's incredible. Nobody can ask that of a human being for 6 years in a row. Well, we have. It's too much for one human being. Senator Mark Begich's ads would have you believe he's 10 men. And it's just, you can't keep that pace up. So when you're Senator Mark Begich and you bring Alaskans and Americans 400 new tax increases in your 6 years, canceled health care policies, including mine, by the way, you can't sustain that for 12 years. Would you sentence a man to another term of this kind of maniacal work? And here's where the family comes in. I expect that he's going to have some family time. There is no way a man could have family time and continue to work at this pace. So if you agree with me, for the children, for his own protection, it's time to bring Senator Mark Begich home to the land that he loves, back to Alaska. Come on. You bring Obamacare to the nation, and you think you got another 6 years in you? I don't think so. How does that work out? Anchor Point Natural Foods. I had a funny conversation with Tara this morning. She's quite funny. If you've not been into Anchor Point Natural Foods, go in there. They bring us our healthy living segments all the time, and they're a sponsor of this program, and I appreciate that very much. Well, over the weekend, they did an inventory at Anchor Point Natural Foods and found that they have 9 out of 10 of their items are non-GMO. That's a big deal to me. It really is. So if you see a red dot, it might be GMO. So when you go through the Anchor Point Natural Food Store, they've done the work for you, and they know some items may or may not contain it, so they're going to go ahead and err on the side that it might. And so, but that's less than 10% of their inventory, less than 10% of what they carry. And she wants to thank you very specifically for your support of non-GMO foods and the letters to the editor and the fact that so many people are getting involved and understanding the dangers of GMO food. That's why Tara at Anchor Point Natural Foods loves and brings you as much local produce, eggs, honey, everything they possibly can. So make Anchor Point Natural Foods your first stop to healthy living and healthy food. They're online, apnaturalfoods.com. House lawmakers vote to keep Knik Arm Bridge and Susitna Dam money in the budget. Knik Arm Bridge, let's just focus on that for a minute. What do you think about that? Are you for it? It's about $1 billion. Let's just call it what it is. There's a group that wants to bond and build it, $1 billion. There's talk of a toll. There's talk of different things that may pay back, etc. The bottom line is, do you think it's worth it? And are you worried, like some of the legislatures, some of the lawmakers are concerned, if they dedicate $1 billion to this project in Anchorage, it's really going to suffer, make their constituencies suffer back, say, like in Homer, Kenai, Saldana, Seward, Kodiak. There's a concern that there will be fewer dollars available for other infrastructure development. On the other hand, some are saying that this will create a boom. And if people in Anchorage are experiencing a boom and construction is booming and this whole other region is being developed, then the whole state's going to win. What do you think? Let's just share some ideas together. Text me or email. Text 299-7653 or email alaskamattersradio@gmail.com. 299-7653. Do you even care? See, I've talked to so many people that are, Knik what? Whatever. It's a lot of money. And I think we should have an opinion on it. And I think I think that it's, personally, I've talked to a lot of people at the Kabata, which I think was the original toll group for the Knik Arm Bridge. And I've talked to a lot of people that were involved with that and are involved now with just the bond and build approach. It makes sense. I think what I'll do is I'll get somebody on this very program. I think I will. I think I'll invite a friend of mine who is very knowledgeable and very passionate about this. I think I'm going to invite him on the program. But I'm at this moment in time more curious right now about what you know about it or what you think about it and what you've got to say about the Knik Arm Bridge and the $1 billion project that could be a bridge to somewhere. 299-7653. Feel free to text me on that. All right, from the Anchorage Daily News, it appears that based on the legislature not wrapping up on time on Easter Sunday, that means that the 3 ballot measures have been set that were set for the August primary are now being moved to November. The 3 voter-led initiatives seeking to legalize marijuana, increase the minimum wage, and and legislative approval for the Bristol Bay mine are set now for the November 4 general election. Gail Funumi, she's the director for the elections division of the state of Alaska. I don't understand. I don't need to know what triggers that versus the real repeal of the oil tax. I mean, but there's some rule that says, okay, if it's repealing or amending a law, it can go forward. But if it's going to create new law, the legislature has to wrap by their intended session. Otherwise, it moves to the general election. All right, so what? Stipulated will move on. However, some are speculating that the new schedule may help Senator Mark Begich, time to bring him home, a Democrat whose seat is being targeted nationally by Republicans. ADN. First off, let me digress here for a moment. Nationally, you know who's nationalizing this election? Senator Mark Begich. Why? Because he's got $6 million. And you know those $6 million in his war chest did not come from you and me. All right. Nationally by Republicans and conservatives in November, the initiative on the ballot could help the senator retain his seat because progressives and liberals will come out to vote for the marijuana and the minimum wage. So in other words, will this rally the troops around Senator Begich? That is the assertion that some politicos are making here in Alaska. I don't know. I'll share that thought with you, what I think about that a little bit further. And upcoming, we'll have Hannah Heimbuch here with the Homer Tribune. So don't go anywhere. That and our Blackwater Bend Espresso Mindbender here on Alaska Matters Radio. You're listening to Alaska Matters Radio. I'm Chris Story, your host for Great Adventures in the Last Frontier. Blackwater Bend Espresso brings you Alaskan Mindbender. Remember, Blackwater Bend Espresso is not your average drip. Have you tried the Bender blender yet? If not, you're really not living. You must try the Bender blender today at Blackwater Bend Espresso. Truly the best drink on earth. Whatever your choice is, it really doesn't matter. Blackwater Bend Espresso, when good won't do, get gourmet. I want to send you out to Blackwater Bend Espresso for free. Here's how you do it. Send me a text message with your name and answer to 299-7653, 299-7653. The question is, of the top 10 largest islands in the United States, how many are in Alaska? Of the top 10 largest islands in the United States, how many are in Alaska? A, 10 islands in Alaska, all 10. B, 8 of the 10. Or C, 2 out of the 10. Of the top 10 largest islands in Alaska, in the country, how many are in Alaska? Your name and answer, 299-7653. 299-7653. Daylight was just beginning to break when Robin Crocker let her dogs out on April 4th. It was a crisp Friday morning outside their Greer Road home, east of Homer. These are the opening words and the opening line to a great article called "The Dog Survives Owl Abduction" by Hannah Heimbuch of the Homer Tribune. Hannah joins me now. Hannah, welcome to Alaska Matters Radio.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chris.
What a great story. Now, obviously, there's a good end to the story for the dog, not for the owl. But take us back to when you first heard about this story, Hannah. You said what to yourself? I was in shock because I love my dog. I don't know about you. I love my dog. I couldn't imagine this happening to my dog.
Well, no, my first reaction was definitely, this is the can't make this stuff up category of Homer stories.
Right.
You can't make this kind of fiction.
Yeah, no kidding. Exactly. You're just exactly right. You cannot make this up. So back us up. So this Friday morning, Robin lets out. She's got 2 little Chihuahuas. They weigh what, about 3 pounds each, soaking wet, or 5 pounds?
3 pounds each. Yep. She lets them out, and before long, couple moments, she sees this flurry of feathers on the porch, and she hears a dog squealing, and she runs out there, and a great horned owl has her 3-pound Chihuahua around the middle. And so Robin, she instinctively grabs the owl, picks it up, thinks, I'm going to let Ella get away. She thinks the dog gets away, and she lets go and realizes too late she still has my dog.
Oh.
Then her 10-year-old daughter, Aurora, witnesses the entire thing and is absolutely devastated, which you can imagine for a 10-year-old girl watching her pet be carried away, just horrifying.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and this is normally where this story would end.
Correct, exactly.
The tragic end of the story, but that was not the case this time through a wild series of events.
So in one of those events first of all, you just back up for a second because you're the mom, you're the owner of this wonderful little dog, and you've just inadvertently, you had the ability to save its life, and you didn't, and now you got to be going through all kinds of torment.
Oh, yeah. Oh, the whole family was devastated.
Oh, man.
They thought their pet was gone.
And then what? Did they get a call a little bit later? Kind of take us down the rest of the road here.
Well, the rest of it, what happened in the next couple of hours that they had no idea about was, a short time later, probably about 7 in the morning, another woman that lives out East End Road was on her way to work. And she sees in the opposite lane as she's driving toward Homer a couple of sets of eyes. And, being an animal lover, her name's Tasya, she stops and she thinks, gosh, what is that? And she continues on another mile and feels like, I have to turn around. I've just got a feeling. So she turns around, she comes back and sees an owl with what she thought was a dead Chihuahua. And, this breaks her heart. She says, somebody's pet has gotten caught, and thinks, I'm going to try to at least shoo them out of the road, but the owl wasn't having it. It wasn't going to give any ground. So as she finally decides, she's done all she can and goes to get back in her car, speeding down the highway comes a large truck that rolls over top of both the owl and the dog and sends them kind of tumbling down the road, so she immediately gets out of her car and stops again, and now realizes the owl is stunned, and she sees that the dog is alive. And so she now has to decide, what do I do?
And what does she do?
What does she do? She goes over to the owl and sees that it's alive but still stunned, and starts to pry the talons out of this very small dog who, amazingly, is still alive despite these puncture wounds. And eventually, the dog bites her in the course of her trying to pull the talons out because it's obviously already injured and scared. And she puts the dog in the front seat and the owl in the back seat, is bleeding from her hand, driving to work, thinking this is probably the weirdest situation I've been in quite some time.
Now, does she think she's saving the owl's life at this point?
Yes, she
Okay.
Happens to be a compassionate animal lover, and she felt bad for both animals after seeing them hit by this truck. So she thinks, I'll get the dog to the vet, and I'll find a place for the owl to go. And eventually does both of those things. And in the meantime, makes a visit down to KBBI to put on the bush line. Here's what I found. An owl with a chihuahua, and the chihuahua is at the Homer vet. This bush line is then heard by Robin's grandmother, who calls up her granddaughter and said, I have news for you. I think your dog is still alive, which, as you can imagine, was quite a shock to the family in a good, amazing way.
And so I'm still reeling with the idea of actually picking up the owl. See, I wouldn't have done that. I'm like, I'm not saving this owl. But, all right, so they figure out the dog's alive and is at the pound being treated. And then what happens to the owl?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think most people probably wouldn't have picked up the owl.
No.
But she saw that it was injured,
Yeah.
and I think knew that there was a treatment center for birds up in Anchorage, and that's actually where the owl ended up going after a couple of phone calls. It was flown up to the Bird Treatment and Learning Center in Anchorage, and actually it was the fifth owl in a couple of weeks from Homer to go up there with an injury.
Wow.
And as you may, I'm sure that you heard, the owl ended up dying at the treatment center, not of injuries, but of starvation. It was extremely malnourished, which they have been seeing in owls all over the peninsula now because of the extreme drop in the snowshoe hare population.
Exactly.
So after all of this miraculous survival and rescue, we actually are highlighting another major issue that our owl population is facing, which is the loss of their food resource.
It's incredible. I mean, just that dog was meant to live, which I guess the outcome then is the little chihuahua. Is it Ella, you said?
Ella, yeah.
Ella is fine now, right? I mean, she's good?
She is. She has recovered. I think had a little post-traumatic stress, Robin was telling me, but otherwise was recovering quite well.
That's incredible and well written, Hannah. I got to tell you, that's what captured my attention. I mean, obviously it's a neat story, but you captivated the whole thing, I think, very well in your story. So good job. This has to be, I mean, just one of those really fun and exciting stories to write as a reporter.
Yeah, well, yeah, first of all, thank you for reading. And yes, it was fun to write because, through all of these series of events, somehow we got the whole story. And with stuff like this, you usually don't really get to know what happens to these animals, but we were able to find all the people to talk to and figure out what the story really was.
All right. Well, you can go read the story for yourself, homertribune.com, homertribune.com. Hannah Heimbach, the reporter. Hannah, great job, and keep up the good work.
All right. Thank you. Good afternoon.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for being part of the program. Just an amazing story. I keep coming back. I'm very selfish. I keep coming back to my own little Cooper and just cringing inside to think of him in the clutches of an owl or an eagle. Thank you to Kevin and Courtney at Napa Auto Parts in Homer. And it's people like Kevin and Courtney. They're real people. They are just absolutely human beings. And so often we forget, I think, when we see corporate colors and we see Napa Auto Parts, we think, well, they're part of a great big chain and sort of this humanless corporation. Not so. Kevin and Courtney Kyle own Napa Auto Parts in Homer, and the entire crew. I mean, they've got people who've been there over a dozen years, and they're all ASE certified. If you don't know what that means, then you'll fit right in with me at Napa Auto Parts in Homer, because it doesn't matter. Here's what it means. They know what they're talking about, so you don't have to. And here's the other thing I see. I see in Napa Auto Parts in Homer experts. I see people that are in there that know what they're doing, and that tells me, hey, I'm in the right place. So I want to say thank you to Kevin and crew at Napa Auto Parts for sticking through it with us here in Homer through thick and thin times, because they've been around a long time, and they're going to be here for you for the long road. The long haul on this road, keeping you on the road at the end of the road. Napa Auto Parts in Homer. I want to say thank you to them. This is kind of interesting about the islands question. So you can enter to win two. I want to send you to Blackwater Bend for free. I mean, we're going to give away 2 coffee cards. Come on already. Free coffee card. The question is, of the top 10 largest islands in the U.S., how many are in Alaska? Is it 10, 8, or 2? 299-7653. You can enter to win also. 299-7653. Okay, so here's an interesting fact while you're guessing here. Is it 8, 10, or 2 islands? Long Island is number 11. That's the 11th largest island in the United States. How many people do you think live on Long Island? You should know that it is smaller than Kodiak Island. Long Island is smaller than Kodiak. Would you believe there are 7.4 million people living on Long Island. Could you imagine inhabiting a place? You've been to Kodiak. Could you think about even just the peninsula here? What if there were 7 million people in Alaska? Forget the peninsula. 7.4 million people on this. What is it? Let me look and see. I think it's 3,600 square miles. Is that what it is? No, it's 1,400 square miles. 1,400 square miles with 7.4 million people. That's just incredible. Just absolutely astonishing. Tiffany and I met somebody last year from New York, and they were from Long Island. And to Tiffany's chagrin and shame, I said to them, I said, "Oh, you're from Long Island." I said, "Amy Fisher, right? The Long Island Lolita." Yeah, I'm familiar with her. Anyway, that was sort of embarrassing that was our my one corollary to Long Island. So anyway, it was kind of funny. You remember Joey Buttafuoco and that was a tragic thing. But it came up during my tenure as a young adult starting to pay attention to the news. I think I was 18 when that happened. But anyway, hey, listen, Joe Miller is going to be here in just a little bit. We'll give you another chance to enter to win the Blackwater Bend Espresso Mind Bender. We've got, more stories from the Alaska Dispatch. We've got, what do I got here? Kodiak's biggest drug bust ever, $2.2 million in meth and heroin. Did you hear about that? I don't know what's going on around here. Honestly, it's all over the state. It's probably something that's endemic to our country right now, but something's got to be done about the drugs, the heroin, the meth, this kind of stuff. It's really and truly corrupting the youth of America, and it's just an absolute shame. I can't even imagine the actual cost that it's costing you and me. Hey, I'm Chris Story. We'll be back with Joe Miller here on Alaska Matters Radio. You're listening to Alaska Matters Radio. I'm indeed Christopher Story, your host for Great Adventures in the Last Frontier. Joining me in just a moment, Mr. Joe Miller, U.S. Senate candidate. Got a few questions for him. You're welcome to text me your questions, 907-299-7653, 299-7653. Blackwater Bend Espresso brings you this portion of the program. It's your opportunity to get a free coffee card out of Blackwater Bend for free. And here's what I want you to do. Just text me your name and answer to 299-7653. The question: of the top 10 largest islands in the U.S., how many are located in Alaska? Is it 10 of the top 10, 8 of those islands, or 2 are in Alaska, the largest islands, Long Island not included? So you may have seen recently in the Alaska Dispatch, or other places are covering it as well, that U.S. Senate candidate Joe Miller launched his campaign. He's calling it the Liberty Launch. Joe, I'm running a campaign myself, and the campaign is on behalf of Senator Mark Begich, and I'm calling it "Let's Bring Him Home. He's Done Enough."
Well, I like that.
I wish I had thought about the Liberty Launch, though. I like that.
That's pretty consistent with our theme as well. Yeah, Liberty Launch. It was a phenomenal thing last night. We did it at the Valley, had several hundred people there. Lars Larson, the national syndicated radio talk show host, Gun Owners of America, had a good group of people there. Really a great time.
And in fact, I think it's important to know that you were endorsed by the Gun Owners of America, and now they are sometimes described by some people as making the NRA look soft on the Second Amendment.
They're a pretty hardcore gun group, and in fact, they do help keep the NRA honest. My wife and I are both benefactor life members of the NRA, but we're very proud to have the Gun Owners of America endorsement. We also have the National Association for Gun Rights endorsement, which is another hardcore, fast-growing group out there. It has several million likes on Facebook, and they're both out there, the Gun Owners of America and NAGR, doing great work in D.C. to protect those Second Amendment rights.
Now let's just fast forward and say that the primaries happened, and Joe Miller is in fact the Republican nominee for the seat back in Washington, D.C. I can think of 6 million reasons to think that general election is going to be hard fought. I guess maybe a better way to phrase my question actually is, Joe, is this going to come down to money in the end, and who's got the most of it?
No, we fundamentally disagree with that. I mean, if you look at, for example, what happened in the primary in 2010, we were right now on hand. I think we've got $300,000 in the primary in 2010. That's what we spent, and of course we're at the start point at the same time probably in 2010 that we started, about the same time frame in April. So we're light years ahead of where we were, and of course keep in mind that we got outspent many times to one in both the primary and the general. The fact is that money doesn't always correlate to votes. It's important. Obviously, we want your listeners that stand behind us. It's not just the gun rights endorsement. We have now Alaska Right to Life endorsement. We received that several days ago. We've got a good core group that's still with us. In fact, most of the people that were behind us in the 2010 race still with us. It's important to note, too, that when you talk about the money, if you evaluate the votes and the support from 2010, if we preserve 50% of what we had in the general in 2010 and we won the primary, the general will be hard fought. I mean, there's a lot of monetary interests that are at stake here. Crony capitalism is afoot. It's happening under the banner of both parties. And so when you're talking about billions of federal dollars, even though they are shrinking to this state, people have a vested interest in continuing, the type of game that picks the winners and losers, that doesn't really keep a free enterprise system in place. And the end result of that is in politics, lots of money flows. But ultimately in this state, it's the vote that matters. Mm-hmm. Grassroots that matters, and that's what we're motivating.
Yeah, I agree with you completely, the grassroots aspect of it. And I think that my take on what Senator Begich is doing, and everywhere I go online or radio or television, and I'm glad that he's spending all that money marketing. That's fine. Spend it. Let's lubricate the economy, Mark. I appreciate that. That's probably the best thing he's done for our economy, to be quite honest with you, is spend that $6 million here. But I liken it to the idea that, in fact, I think he's just highlighting the idea. There is nothing he can say, there is nothing that his campaign can tell me that will whitewash or take away the day that I learned my health care, my insurance of choice is no longer available to me and my family, the Story family. There is nothing his $6 million can do to make me forget what he did to me there.
And not only that, you've got his words where he promised you could keep your doctor and your health plan. I mean, how can you counter that? I mean, it's the same sort of thing that we've done before in the state, where you've got somebody saying one thing, but the facts are completely counter to it. So he can talk all he wants about, being pro, I'm in favor of you preserving your health care, or I'm in favor of making sure that we have a good health care system, or, I'm pro-gun. But then you compare it to, him being the 60th vote on Obamacare. You compare it to the fact that he supported Obama 93% of the time, and in addition to that, voted to confirm a lot of folks that are anti-gun. I mean, how do you get there? I mean, I think the Alaskan people are smart. They're going to see, his ads, compare them to what he said. They're going to say, this is just more of the same. Another politician out there trying to get votes and saying anything he can to make sure he gets them.
But Joe, I've got to take homage with that a little bit. He rode on a snow machine all the way to, I don't know if it was the North Pole or the North Slope, and drilled oil wells for you and me. Hey, I've got a couple of questions about, Senator Begich's relationship with Senate President Harry Reid, who calls you a terrorist, a domestic terrorist, if you agree that the BLM probably acted a little heavy-handed. I want to get into that and a couple of other things here. And why should you pick Joe Miller for your next senator? We're going to find out here on Alaska Matters Radio. I'm Chris Story, your host for Great Adventures in the Last Frontier. Joe Miller is my guest. He is running for the U.S. Senate. He'd like to replace Senator Mark Begich. He'd like your vote. We're going to ask him in a moment why we should actually consider him for Senate. And, we'll give him an opportunity to just speak his mind. But what's been on my mind lately is what we see in Nevada right now, and the corollary or the corresponding situation in King Cove with this federal overreach, or the idea that so much of our lands, our state land, is federally owned and controlled. And so the concept there, of course, with Cliven Bundy's unpaid grazing fees. So let's just say, notwithstanding the argument that maybe he's violated the law, maybe he hasn't, there is no doubt in anybody's mind, there shouldn't be, that the BLM so overreacted with snipers and artillery that this became something that couldn't be ignored by millions of people. And Senate President Harry Reid has the audacity to refer to these people as not patriots, but I can't do his voice, but domestic terrorists. What? And this is the guy, Joe, this is the guy that Senator Begich stood with on Obamacare.
Right. I mean, that kind of an attitude is just absolutely outrageous. What happened there is indicative of a problem that's been created by the federal government having its hand in lands that it has no business under the Constitution holding title over. And I'm what happened with that, with what happened in Nevada, has helped, I think, educate the populace. People now understand well, that's way overreach on the part of the federal government. Not just overreach, but really it's almost tyrannical the way that response happened. And you've got all these gunned-up BLM agents that probably have no right under the Constitution anyway to be out there committing law enforcement acts, supposed law enforcement acts. But in addition to that, you've also got an Obama administration that just a few months before that, during, the government shutdown that he blamed on the House, they shut off federal lands, again, kind of raising this issue in the American public's perspective. What is the federal government doing under ownership of lands? I really think for us here in Alaska, that it presents a wonderful opportunity. We can carry this wave of public opinion to the point that maybe we can actually push back the feds a little bit on ownership. I think it's an opportunity to join with people like the likes of Ted Cruz and Mike Lee to stand up to the federal government and their ownership. I know I was outraged in what I saw, not just down in Nevada with all those armed federal agents, but also what the Obama administration has been doing over the last several years with respect to federal lands. And I do think people here in Alaska get it, and they want to push back too.
It's unreal. It's almost like the day that you woke up in America and found out that it was illegal not to buy a product from a company, illegal not to have health insurance, A, and B, that you aren't going to be able to keep the health insurance you thought you had and liked against those promises that we all knew probably weren't going to come true. And then you look at what's happening in King Cove, 11 miles. They simply want to save their own lives with an 11-mile single-lane road over to Cold Bay, and the federal government says no. And as far as I can tell, Joe, I agree with you. This hopefully will push sentiment and the public to a point where they say this far, no further. But I would have thought when Senator Begich had come out and said that, whether you can keep your plan if you like it, and now we can't, and now he's spinning that into whatever it is. Well, I'm going to fix it. I'm going to provide some fixes. I'm a little bit, I guess, pessimistic. I'm a little bit pessimistic that he may get a pass in all this.
I don't think he will. I mean, I think people are outraged. You look at where he's at right now in polling. I mean, we don't trust polls so much. We're 40 points down against Murkowski when we beat her in the primary. Right now, we're holding Bill Begich below 50. We've had an increase from the Harper to the Rasmussen poll. I'm talking about Joe Miller versus Begich. We jumped 17 points just in the last several weeks. So we feel pretty good about where we're at with that. But I think that even taking away the polling with respect to the federal government, where they're at, when you hear stories like what happened in Chicken, Alaska, when you talk about what happened with the guy up on the Yukon River at the hands of, really jackbooted federal enforcers that shouldn't be out there doing stuff that we know the Constitution never authorized them to do. I think most Alaskans hear that and they get outraged over it. They're going to remember it. They're going to turn out at the polls, I think, twice as much as everybody else, and we're going to see victory in November. Begich has voted with Obama about 93% of the time. I mean, that's just intolerable for the average Alaskan voter.
Yeah, and as far as I'm concerned, that's the platform. That is the platform right there, 93% of the time, and in lockstep with Senate President Harry Reid, be it to get positions or better treatment with respect to committees. I don't know or care. All I need to hear is Harry Reid call those folks down in Nevada domestic terrorists. I link that to Senator Begich, and they're tied together in my mind. I can't separate the two. Well, okay, let's ask the ultimate question. Why, Joe Miller, should Alaskans pick you to be their next senator? What's the compelling message?
Well, I'm the only guy that's going to stand up to the forces in both parties that are trying to continue to crater this country. You look at D.C., and under the Republican or Democratic model, it's continued to expand, it's continued to grow debt, it's continued to take away our rights. The government's a zero-sum game. The more the government takes, the less we have, both in freedom and enterprise. And, everybody that goes up there claiming to be part, they've got the experience because of government, or they've worked in, the Bush administration, or they've got this or that, they're part of the problem. And when you tear everything away and you realize that you've got one guy fighting against that expansion, you've only got one choice, and that is you vote to restrain Washington, D.C., or you vote for more of the same. And I think it even gets more fundamental than that, or not more fundamental, but there certainly is another thing that needs to be looked at too. And that is when we come up on this general election, you've got to have a clear contrast. If you don't, you're going to have people stay home, and you aren't going to win the big fight. You got to be behind somebody that is actually working to get government back to the restraints of the Constitution and putting Alaska back where it needs to be. And that is in control of its resource base, relying on something other than the federal dollar that we know is all too soon going to go away. This government right now is insolvent. $17 trillion in absolute debt, $200 trillion in future unfunded liabilities. Everybody knows that that's unsustainable. There's no way we can ever pay it back. At some point, the gravy train stops. And if we haven't shifted our reliance into another area, too bad. And in order to do that, you got to have people fighting on these big issues. I mean, fighting on the concept of federal ownership of the majority of this state, the majority of most of the western states, fighting against the government that's involved in these areas that the Constitution never authorized, Obamacare, education, other areas that have continued to not just take away the rights of the states, but create the insolvency that's hobbled this country. We've got to have people that are willing to stand up to that, not be co-opted, to fight like Ted Cruz and Mike Lee. And I'm the guy, if that's what they want. If you want more of the same, pick Begich, Treadwell, or Sullivan. They'll give you more of the same.
I just wish, Joe, you had something to say about it and maybe a little bit of passion. I'm kidding. That's great. Okay, well, I asked, you answered, and I guess Alaskans are going to hear and make up their own minds. But Joe Miller, appreciate it. Now, what's the website? Remind us.
JoeForLiberty.com is the campaign site. Of course, our news site, JoeMiller.us. We love getting the competitive message out there, especially in a media that in this state is almost entirely outside control, with a few exceptions like your radio station.
Awesome. You are the man. Joe Miller, thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks, Chris. Appreciate it.
Don't go anywhere. Much more to come here on Alaska Matters Radio. All right, Joe Miller is certainly energized. We're going to actually, I've had Lieutenant Governor Meade Treadwell on the program before, and I've actually extended an invitation as well to Dan Sullivan, former Attorney General here in Alaska, to be on the program, and his people are arranging that. So we'll bring you a variety. We'll bring you a cross section of those running for U.S. Senate that want your vote and attention. Interesting article in the Alaska Dispatch, and this is out of Wasilla. Says an energized Joe Miller on Monday officially, and I'm reading this because I think of what Joe just said about the outside owned media in Alaska. So just listen with me here. An energized Joe Miller on Monday kicked off his campaign, the, quote, Liberty launch, as he called it, a Patriots Day spectacle. Okay? Patriots Day spectacle. Spectacle. I mean, come on. We were talking about bias here or unbiased? I don't think so. Filled with roaring supporters. Now, here's further. Country music and staunch support. Why are they highlighting country music? Because they're trying to segregate out and separate. That's exactly what the author of this article is trying to do. Gun owners of America and an increasingly influential gun rights lobby that never mind Second Amendment, a gun rights lobby that makes the National Rifle Association look soft. Please. I mean, this is written specifically to co-opt your thinking towards a candidate with specific words like spectacle, like not referencing Second Amendment rights, but gun rights. Ooh, I'm afraid of guns. Harry Reid. I was pleased to hear U.S. candidate for Senate Joe Miller talk about also likewise. I think we agree in off-air conversations about Cliven Bundy. I don't have the answer. People say, well, Cliven Bundy is, one person on social media referred to him as a welfare queen. Now, this person you need to know is left of as far left as you can get. So my question to her, which goes unanswered to this day, is, are you proposing then that people on welfare should have their personal property stripped from them at gunpoint and sniper point? Is that what we're going to do? We're going to start busting down doors and bringing in snipers and armed brigades, and we're going to have people have their property taken from. Well, I mean, come on, we got to be careful of the language we use and the power that we give over to a federal government. You know who stands with this program? The Anchor River Inn. John and I got to go out to the Anchor Point area here pretty quick and look at another piece of property. So it means it's my turn to buy lunch. Last time John bought me lunch at the Anchor River Inn, it's my turn to buy him lunch at ARI. You can go out there for lunch or dinner. Don't forget they've got accommodations, family-style food, gifts, groceries, and more, and have been in Anchor Point. Anchor River Inn's been the heartbeat of Anchor Point for more than 50 years. You can check out what's going on the Anchor River anytime. Go to anchorriverinn.com. and look at the Anchor Cam. I want to thank Jesse Klutz and family for sponsoring this program. Had a great conversation with Hannah Heimbach earlier. If you missed that portion of the program, go to our website later, alaskamattersradio.com, alaskamattersradio.com. Also, I've invited to the program a guy by the name of J.R. Wilcox, which if you're in the oil industry and your name is J.R., that's awesome. That is so cool. I'm a big Dallas fan, not the new Dallas. I think that's awful. It never should have been put on the air. The old Dallas. I mean, talk about desperate for money. This new Dallas show is just terrible. Obviously, they're like Sue Ellen and Bobby and JR. He was on the program before Larry Hagman passed, but that's just terrible new show. But the old show, loved it. But anyway, this is also from the Alaska Dispatch. The natural gas of Cook Inlet does a lot for hundreds of thousands of Alaskans who live in South Central. It heats their homes, cooks their food, powers the lights, and recharges cell phones. The gas is so prevalent that those residents utilize it almost every minute of their lives, and that's been status quo for at least 2 generations. This, according to J.R. Wilcox, co-founder and CEO of the Cook Inlet Energy and chairman of the Cook Inlet Subcommittee for the Anchorage Chamber of Commerce, blah, blah, blah. I've invited him on the program, reached out to him earlier today. I'm hopeful that we can coordinate him maybe next week or the following. Really want to get this guy on the program, and I want to get his opinion on the Proposition 1 and what repealing Senate Bill 21 will do to Alaska and do to your livelihood and your way of life. So what do you do to keep people on the ground interested in the role Cook Inlet gas, natural gas, plays in their lives? Let them know the importance of the resource, according to Wilcox. That is why I've reached out to the man and hope to bring his opinion and his knowledge base here to you and I. Is the system working? Anchorage Daily News reports Kodiak's biggest bust ever, $2.2 million worth of heroin and methamphetamines. Guy had it in a little briefcase of some sort, a hard case in his oven in a hotel room. Must have been a suite or something like that. They did some really great investigative work, and some detectives figured out who this guy was and that he was involved in some dealing going on over there in Kodiak. And 44 years old. They seized 25.3 ounces of meth, 1.8 ounces of high-grade heroin, according to a written statement on Monday. Here's what I want to point out to you. This guy had 17 prior felony convictions from Washington State, many for drug-related crimes, the affidavit says. 17. Let that resonate a minute. 17 previous felony convictions. How? Why? What? That's like the guy who killed that young woman, or maybe 2 teenagers, I forget which. Horrible incident in Anchorage, had 10 previous DUIs. And that's my question. Is the system working? How can we have somebody on the streets with 17 felony convictions? I don't get it. I know in David and Goliath, Malcolm Gladwell's newest book, I was telling Tiffany this morning, I'm trying to remember the principle behind this or the concept of it. I forget. But basically 3 strikes in California didn't work because statistically with the 3 strikes law, you would have statistically looked for a reduction in criminal convictions and criminal behavior. But in fact, they saw it increase. Because the 3 strikes law, apparently there was a corollary why it wasn't working. I forget the philosophy, but I'm struggling to understand how and why we have a system that would allow somebody to be walking free with 17 felony convictions. It doesn't make any sense at all. And I wonder how much heroin is in your community. How many millions of dollars in meth is in your community right now? And what can you do about it? The law enforcement in Kodiak actually had the cooperation of citizens in Kodiak. And that's what I think that's what it's going to take. I think it's the police departments. I think you need a real active and watchful police department and troopers. I think we all, and guess what? I'd like to see community meetings. I'd like to see outreach. I'd like to see articles in the paper. I'd like to see them guesting here on this show and others. I would like to see law enforcement reaching out to you and I and saying, this is what you can do to help us. Because I don't have a clue what to look for. And I bet you don't either. I honestly don't know. I told you that before. I have no idea what heroin users even look like. Meth, you think of meth mouth and all that. I don't know. I honestly don't know. But I do know 17 convictions, felonies. That's awful. Here in Homer, we are spending $31,000 in a published book because the mayor of Homer believes that that's the way to reach out to the rest of the world. The internet's this newfangled thing's probably not going to last. We all know that you put your money into hardbound books. That's where you put your money. All right. Well, the bottom line is the Homer Tribune did an article. It was also our new fan favorite here. Hannah Heinbuck wrote the article. And I wanted to read you a couple of responses from people about the Homer City Council spending $31,000. Why is this relevant to you? Because guess what? Your council, your assembly, your Senate, your House, your government government is wasting your money every single day. Jan Z says this is highly unusual, particularly for a city constantly threatening to raise food tax because they cannot make ends meet. Could there be a conflict of interest involved? Is this why we need to pass a statute of limitations on ethics complaints? I thought that was a great comment, killing a couple birds with one stone. In fact, one city employee actually testified at the council meeting saying that in a climate when you're asking city employees to do with less healthcare, with reducing their costs and trying to phase out their healthcare benefits, and you, on top of that, spend $31,000 in a book to publicize Homer. Come on, what are we doing here, folks? We got to get it together. Guess what? There are 8 islands in Alaska that make the top 10 largest islands in the U.S. I want to thank Brandon. He's going out to Blackwater Bend Espresso for free. He knew the answer to that. I want to thank you for listening. Dave Becker for engineering this program. I want to thank Joe Miller for checking in with us, telling us all about his campaign. And, of course, Hannah Heimbach. You can go read her story and listen back at to this show at AlaskaMattersRadio.com, AlaskaMattersRadio.com. We're going to have a great time on Thursday. Tune in to the other greatest show on earth, Radio Realty, the same very station. I'm Chris Story, reminding you that you are the one that matters, and so does Alaska. See you next time.